When new people walk through your doors at your church, do they feel welcomed? Do they feel engaged? Do they come back for a second time, a third time? Do they eventually become regular attenders? Well, what we're going to do today is I'm going to bring on a guest, and what he does is exactly that. He helps people connect to his church. His job is to help new people, guests, when they walk in the door, to find that church, his church, a place that they can call home, a place where they can come in and they can engage with Jesus, a place where they can find community, where they can go deeper into scripture and learn the Bible. His job is to help them to make that connection. And I'm going to interview him and I'm going to ask him questions and help us as a collective group understand how we can better connect people to our churches, connect them to our communities, and ultimately connect them to Jesus himself. All right, so let's get started. So the big question is this: how do pastors like us, who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. I hope you are doing wonderfully wherever you are. I know here in Virginia Beach, it's a little bit rainy. And so some of us here have our sweatshirts on because we're nice and cozy here in the air conditioner. We've had a great weekend enjoying the beach and enjoying just the nice sun. And then it got all rainy on us. And so we're all hunkered inside. And so I hope you're doing well wherever you are and whatever it is you are doing. In this podcast, the Ministry Hackers Podcast, our goal is to help you as a pastor and ministry leader live the dream life in ministry, whatever that looks like. Whatever God has designed for you, we want to help you discover that and start living that right away. And I want to help you today by giving you a list of 10 free getaways around the country. These are places that people have said, hey, I want to bless pastors and ministry leaders, and we want to give you our cabin. We want to give you our bed and breakfast. We want to give you our ranch. Whatever it is that they have, they are giving it to pastors and ministry leaders just like you to come for a free getaway. It could be anywhere between 2 days and 14 days. Most of these places will allow you to stay up to 2 weeks for completely free. And so I want you to go to brandonpartycooper.com/free getaway, and you'll get your list of free getaways all over the country. Find one. You may actually find one in your backyard. All you have to do is call them up, make a reservation, and they will give it to you for free for anywhere between 2 and 14 days. So again, go to brandonpartycooper.com/free getaway, get your list of 10 free getaways, and see if there's one near you so you can get away. As we're closing out this summer, we have a couple months left. Find a place where you can go, or maybe you can do a sabbatical or a getaway in the fall. Book a place, book a time for you to get away and spend some time resting, relaxing, and taking a break from everything you do, all the ministry, all the demands, all the challenges, and all of the things that you have on your plate. Take a little time away. Again, go to brandonpartycooper.com/free getaway and get that list today. Okay, so if you have been a listener of the Ministry Hackers Podcast for any amount of time, you know that we started in January of 2020. And so in January 2020, we launched the podcast. We did that for a couple months, and we were actually under a different name. Mind the Gap was the name of the podcast. And at the time, I had a wonderful co-host that started the podcast with me and walked through the first several episodes. I think the first 6 or 8 months he was with us. And then he went off to other bigger and greater things. But today he's joining us again, and he's going to bring his own insight from his own ministry experience, from the things that he's doing right now in the church that he's at, and the experience that he has gained over the last couple of years, moving from pandemic church life to post-pandemic church life, and how to connect guests to become regular attenders, how to rebuild the community that we all have in our churches that we're trying to, some of us are still rebuilding, some of us are retooling, and some of us are just figuring out how to reach people and engage people in this new environment that we're living in. And so I wanted you to welcome to the show, Pastor Matt Wazbinski. Matt, welcome to the show.
What's up? Hey, when you say all that stuff, it's so funny. It's almost like this little time capsule in my brain. Like, I think I remember you even saying the phrase, because like January of 2020, I remember at some point you saying, I think this COVID thing's going to be a big deal. And so like,
Right?
look back at just like the pure, almost like ignorance that we had of like what was about to hit us
Yeah.
was like incredible to like look back. I'm like, yeah, I think like we might have to like take a week or two off. Like,
Yeah.
and now kind of hopefully like coming out on the other side of that, like it's just interesting to look back at that.
Yeah, it is. Well, and do you remember what our first episode was about?
What was it?
It was the Super Bowl. Remember we talked about the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the
Yes.
week before, I think.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, and so yeah, we were just like, oh yeah, that COVID thing might happen. Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. What about the Super Bowl? And then I remember, like, literally, like 3 weeks into recording, we're like, we're gonna have to pivot
Yeah.
because, like, things are changing fast. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, that's just in my memory. That's always a cool little time capsule. Is looking back at the early days of the podcast and just like how much has changed and how much is been adapted. So that's a
Yeah.
pretty cool memory.
Yeah, it is. And for you, if I remember right, you were pretty new in the position you're in now. You had just started that, correct?
Yeah, so I think that we started recording in January, and I think I just started this position like in September of the previous year. So I
Yeah.
was still, a little bit wet behind the ears and just not coming to this, 242 where I work is like a 7 campus, like big old thing. I had been in youth ministry for over a decade at that point. So switching even ministry positions,
Right.
let alone locations and churches and all that. So yeah, so I was just kind of trying to get my bearings a little bit. And then, COVID really helped that out quite a bit of like, oh, okay, well, no one knows what they're doing. So
Right.
this is great. But yeah, so that was definitely a lot has changed since then. Yeah.
Okay, so share with everybody exactly what your role is, your title, and what that looks like on a day-to-day.
Yep. So I am the community life pastor for our Saginaw campus. 242 is structured with 7 campuses across the state of Michigan. And my role consists of basically 3 things: first impressions, teams, and next steps. So a lot of my job is getting people who maybe are checking us out for the first time or been attending for a little bit, but want to dive in a little bit deeper and be a part of what we're doing at 242, getting them more connected. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that has to do with just kind of the first impression side. What is the experience when people walk into our building, when they are, in the lobby, when they're getting coffee, when they are connecting with people in the parking lot? What does that all look like? And then the evolution of, okay, now they like what they see, they feel God in our building, and they want to be a part of what's going on.
Right.
How do we make it easy for them to then go from someone who's just checking this out to someone who is now participating and helping other people take their next steps?
Nice.
Mhm.
So, okay, so again, you started September of 2019. 8 months in, the whole world shuts down. And then essentially since then, you've been kind of paving the path and creating like what that looks like. Like how do you bring regular attend or how you bring guests into your church and make them regular attenders in for the most part a post-pandemic world. And
Mhm.
so like help us understand what has been maybe the biggest change from the first 8 months you were in the position to the rest of, the last year and a half or so. What has been the biggest transition or change in how you do things to help people connect with your church?
I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is we are losing a lot of the casual churchgoer.
Hmm.
Which used to be, if we're honest, in most churches, is probably a pretty large percent.
Mm-hmm.
The
Right.
people might attend once a month. They'll attend if their kid doesn't have a sporting event. If we're up in Michigan and so summertime, like it is not unusual to have 50% attendance of what we normally have because
Wow.
people like to go out camping into the lakes and all that sort of stuff. And people like to take advantage of that. And
Right.
so that, even in a healthy church, is not abnormal. But one thing that we're realizing a lot is just that transition from going from video, which we had to do during the pandemic. we had months where we were strictly online,
Mm,
and then now get people back into the building. I think that in some ways, I think it was a kind of necessary evil. I don't want to say evil, but
right.
necessary problem that we had was when the pandemic started and we closed our doors and went 100% online. We had to convince people the value of you can get almost everything that you would need online,
Right.
because we wanted people to still be attending, we wanted
Right.
people still to be participating. And so we almost had to pitch this idea of, I know you want to come to church, but you can still get some
Right.
level of that experience by watching it on your computer screen or at home with your family.
Hmm.
Now, what we're experiencing is the flip side of that coin,
Right.
where for the last year and a half, we have been pitching the idea that you can get everything you need by watching it on the computer screen. So why do I need to come back to your building?
Right.
Which for me is one of the big things that I really have to champion and really have to push forward, is the idea that church is so much more than just listening to a message and worshiping.
Right.
But
That's
one of
good.
the biggest things about the church is serving on a team and being a part and
Right.
getting your hands dirty and serving side by side with other believers to help
Hmm.
other people take their next steps. And so for me, that's been the big thing. Before it was, hey, you are coming here, let's get you more plugged in. And now it's, let me tell you the value that you're missing out on by not being on a team. And so
Right.
that's kind of a small shift, but it's something I've had to emphasize even more, because we want to encourage people, hey, yes, you could watch online. Yes, you could just, hey, I'm busy on Sunday, I'll just catch the replay on Tuesday on
Hmm.
YouTube. But that there's value and there's something about being a part of the family of God that you miss out on
Right.
when you're not serving other people.
When it's almost a shift from like I go to church to receive to I go to the church to give. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
and that simple shift alone, it's not as attractive to casual goers because they're looking to receive. And so it's a question of how do we get them from casual goers to become bought into this idea that we're here to give as well as receive. And so, yeah, that's interesting because it's almost like you have one message, hey, it's okay to go online. It's okay to go online. And then you have to switch that to it's okay to go online, but live is better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice. Gotcha. So then, okay. So because a lot of your not regular, a lot of your casual attenders are not coming, at least are not committed. You're drawing in really your core. Your core
Mm-hmm.
people. So any guests that come in, the idea is then okay, how do we get them deeper into our church culture? How do we get them into what we do? So what's maybe one of the most effective strategies or tactics that you've used to help attenders or guests connect with the church or become regular attenders? What's something that you're trying to, when they first walk in, to connect them with, okay, this is 242 is the place for you.
Yeah. I think that a big thing is we want them to experience a lot of people who are not the pastor.
That's good.
We had this idea. It's actually like one of our values of kill the celebrity at
Mm-hmm.
242. The idea is, there shouldn't just be one guy, because I feel like in church culture, that's kind of how it is in a lot of places, where you have like the guy who is kind of like leading the show. The problem is, once that guy either transitions to something else,
Right.
or maybe they like that guy, then suddenly this isn't the church for them anymore.
Right.
And so we really want basically everyone who is on a team to be an ambassador for 242. So from the moment that you're pulling into the parking lot, to someone's opening the door, to someone's helping you with your coffee, checking in your kids, helping you find where communion is, all these sort of things, we want everyone on our teams to kind of be on the same page. Uh, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but one of the things that we do is like a teams training, where regardless of what ministry that you're in, you go through teams training, because we want everyone, whether you're on the worship team, parking team, whatever, to kind of have the same base level knowledge of what 242 is, what we believe, and how we want people to be a part of it. And I think that that's tangible when kind of people walk through the doors. I'm going to share a quick story just about how we ended up at 242. So I left a previous job, kind of had some church hurt, and honestly was like not even really sure if I want to do church stuff anymore, just because, I'd been doing ministry for 10 years. And we kind of moved back home. My wife was pregnant with our second child. And we're like, but we should still go to church. That's a good thing to do. And there was 242, which was at the time meeting out of a high school. And I was snobby about it. And I said, I don't want to go to a church that like is a set up, tear down church. Like I kind of just wanted to sit in the back, kind of be that casual attender for a little
Right.
bit. Because so much of my life for the past decade had been like church.
Right.
And so,
Which,
but
let me
my
just interject, as pastors and ministry leaders, when we transition out of ministry, that's kind of the state that most of us are in. Even if we're transitioning from a good situation, when we transition out, we're wanting to just attend for a little bit and just kind of take it in. And I think that's okay. I think that's almost a healthy approach, whether you're walking away from a difficult situation or not. That's a healthy approach to ministry when you're kind of in that transition period. So
yeah, it's almost like a breakup. Like even if it's a healthy breakup,
right.
like
Yep.
you probably can just jump right into the next thing you see, which I think sometimes as pastors can be tempting because it's like, oh well, I'm equipped. I feel like I could help. But sometimes you just need to be like, I just need to sit and worship with my family for a little bit. I just need to, receive from God for a little bit and then find a good place that I feel like fits naturally for me to fit in.
Yeah.
And so we started attending 242 and I will preach this forever to my first impressions team. And I share almost every team's training. But we pull into the parking lot and we were doing the world tour of churches. Like there are those people who like want to sit in the back and not be noticed. We were the people that are like filling out the connect card, give me the coffee mug.
Give me the full
Like,
experience.
exactly. Like I want the free gift. I'll meet you at the like connection table or whatever it is. Like we were doing the whole thing. And so we pull in and there was a sign that said, new here, turn on your flashers, like your like warning lights. And we're like, all right, here we go. And so like we hit our passwords. And then the parking lot person waved and then directed us basically to like parking where you pulled right up to the like front of the high school.
Right.
And from that point, we got out. And now I know our current campus pastor, Jim, who was a different position at the time, came out, big guy, big beard, but happy as could be to be there. And he's like, hey, welcome. And they had, so this was all like pre-COVID, they had wagons that they put my daughter in. She was just about 2 years old at the time. And they're like, hey, do you want a wagon ride? And she's like, yeah. And so set her in a wagon. And then like, while like looking back, I'm like, this is genius. But I didn't even realize I was getting kind of like the whole pitch at the time. And so they're wheeling her in, multiple people say hello to me. We stop and get coffee. They take Everly to the kids area. We didn't drop her off because it's like, hey, we don't know you people yet. So we're going to just keep with us. But like the kids, like director showed us, hey, here's our safety measures. Here's, our background checks and here's all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And then we went in and worship was great. The message was great. But what I tell my teams is I did not know what we sang that day. I have no idea who was teaching that day. What I will tell you is I was a hurting person who didn't really want to go to church. And somebody right off the bat made me feel welcomed and feel like, wow, I want to be a part of this. And so being on the first impressions team and over the first impressions team, I tell that story at least like every other week because I want people to know the value of you're not just parking cars. You're not just giving someone a cup of coffee, but every week there's somebody who maybe they got let go from their job. Maybe they're having trouble with marriage. Maybe this is the first time they set foot in a door for 10, 15, 20 years. And you being that welcoming person is going to mean more potentially than the message that they're going to hear, the worship that they're going to engage in. And so 100% of the reason that we came back for week 2 was because how people on the first impressions team made us feel
that's good.
you walk in the door. So I think that is something that you need to preach to your teams. They are never just opening a door. They are never
Right.
just serving
Yeah.
coffee. All that stuff sort of bleeds together. So then they are set up so when the Holy Spirit comes and they encounter him during the service, that they're not thinking about, oh man, took me forever to find a parking, or
Right.
I have two screaming kids and I don't know where to check them
Right.
in. All that stuff kind of connects. So
Yeah.
then later on in the service, God can speak to them a little bit
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you just said, you have kids. And so we have 3 boys. And we've done that. We've got, when we moved here to Virginia Beach, we did the whole church shopping thing. And quite honestly, like usually by the time we got to the seats in the sanctuary, it took us a good 5-10 minutes just to decompress and like focus in on what was going on. And the church that we ended up staying at now, we kind of had a similar experience where, we'd been to multiple churches and it was just chaos trying to navigate and, figure out where to go and get everybody in the right spots, whatever. When we went to this church, it was smooth as can be. Like, we knew where to go. They had, people in the parking lot. Even we're not a big church, but we had people in the parking lot showing us where to go, pointing the kids area. Like all of that was so smooth. And by the time we got to our seats, we were like, no, we're feeling pretty good. Like, this might be a good place to stay because everything was smooth. Everybody was friendly. Everybody made us feel welcome. And I think,
Mhm.
like you said, I think it's important for those teams to understand the level of importance that they have on a new guest, especially when, you know, we have migrating Christians. And so they have expectations coming in, like they're wanting it a certain way, whatever. But then we have people who are truly looking for an encounter with God. They're truly hurting, like you said. They're looking for a church home. Maybe they're a young family and they're saying, "Hey, we just feel like we need to get back in church or we need to go to church for the first time." Those are the people that are really impacted by your team, your hospitality team and your, guest welcome team. Those are the people that are most impacted because they're out of place. They feel uncomfortable. Everything is unfamiliar. They don't have a lot of expectations, but they do know when they feel ignored and they feel passed off and they feel placated. And that's what we don't want. And so helping our teams understand the level of importance they have in that experience, man, it just not only changes the experience of those guests and those people walking in, but overall it changes the experience of the culture of the church and church growth and all of those things. So that's good.
And one thing I want to throw in just real quick, because you had mentioned like, yay, we go to a church that's not that big. I also want to communicate that 242 across the board is a rather large church,
Mm-hmm.
like probably between 8 to 10,000 people, but across our 7 campuses.
Right.
But our individual campus is about 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
So I just know that like there might be someone who's watching this that says like, well, yeah, you can do all that because you're this huge church that has like 1 million volunteers, and like
Yeah.
I only have like a handful of people to help me out.
Yeah.
And so I just really want to encourage people that, you can be strategic about it. You can kind of, even us, for example, it's summertime and people are going on vacations and all that sort of stuff. So we have situations where we either have to move people around or say, hey, is this like mission critical? Let's go without this for the week, but let's make sure that we are doing this because this is
Right.
super important. So I just don't want listeners to get discouraged by
Yeah.
saying like, okay, well, that's great, but that doesn't apply to me because I don't have X, Y, and Z.
Right.
So
Yeah.
my specific examples are coming from a campus of about 200 people.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
good.
so I just didn't want people to think like, oh yeah, well, when you have 1,000 people and you have 500 volunteers, then you can do that. Yeah,
Right.
that helps, but
Right.
yeah, doesn't hurt. But at the same time, a lot of it's about creating like a serving culture. One
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we're really proud of is, I think I would have to look at the latest number, but I think about 60% of the people who attend our church are on a team.
Yeah.
So they're serving in some way, shape, or form,
Yep.
which means that if you're looking at our numbers, we have about, in a church of 200 and some people, we have about 120 people who are on a team. So,
Yeah.
a lot of that is culture. A lot of that is trying to make that work. And
Mm-hmm.
we're still learning and growing and all that. But I just don't want people to get discouraged because they think like, oh, well,
Right.
I'm from a smaller church, I can't make that work.
Right. Well, and it's all relative. I mean, you and I have both been in and on staff at larger churches, and we know, you know, the bigger the church is, yeah, let's say you're in a church of 2,000 people. Well, that means you have, 200, 300, 400 volunteers. But the reality is you need every one of those and probably more. And so, do you have more resources in larger church? Yes, but your need is greater as well. And so I think
Mhm.
it's all relative. And I think to your point, it really comes down to culture. Because I would say where we are right now, our church, we're right around there, 250, somewhere around there. And I would say our number is probably pretty close to yours. 50 to
Mhm.
60% of those attending are on a team and regularly helping in some capacity. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's a question of what kind of culture are you building? What's the culture of your church? Is the culture a culture of servant, a culture of, you know, engaging people, and a culture of, high hospitality and high welcoming and all of that? Or is the culture a taking culture? I'm here to receive, And I think
Yeah.
that, culture is something that we talk about, and it's, we're aware of it, but, how often are we intentionally building the culture of our churches, and intentionally building those under those underpinning currents of who we are as a church. So let
Mhm.
me just kind of flip it for you. Like, for you guys, when you look at your overall culture, because like you said, you're multiple campuses and you've just gone through transition, correct? Your lead pastor
Yep.
just transitioned out, and so
Yep.
you've gone through a shift in a little bit of a shift in culture, as far as like, now we have a new lead. So what would you say is maybe the one or two things culturally that are anchors for you, that help you maintain the culture you have, even as you go through COVID and pandemic and post pandemic, and now a major staff change? Like, what are the maybe one or two things that you would say are these are the anchors of our culture that keep us moving forward how we need to go?
Yeah, and like you said, it's really kind of tough because right now we are in a culture shift because quick background. So COVID, all that sort of stuff, and then our founding pastor actually went and is now the pastor at Willow Creek. And so we had 1 year of having an interim pastor, and then last fall, Tony, who is now our current lead pastor, came in and for the first basically 3 months just absorbed, hey, what's it like here, how does this go? And then in January of this year really started rolling out, okay, this is where I feel like this is great, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like this could change, this is kind of where my heart is and where I feel the Holy Spirit's leading us. And so we're still honestly in that kind of rolling out stuff,
Mm.
um to figure out, okay, where, in 2 years from now, when we're onboarding new staff, what are the big like cultural keys that we're going to preach that maybe aren't even on the board yet?
Right.
And so for us, I think that one of the things that we really preach is the idea of serving versus volunteering.
Mm.
Volunteering is really good, but a lot of times it is somewhat self-serving. Like I want to, you know, go and help out at there's a task that needs to be done, and so I'm going to go and I'm going to help with the task versus serving, which is I'm going to kind of step out of my comfort zone, or I'm going to sacrifice something that is close to me. And even if that's comfort, even if that might be financial, whatever that might be, to help someone else who is in need. Because I think a lot of times people look at it and they say, well, I want to help out in this area, but I'm just so busy, or I want to do this or I want to do that, but I just don't know if I have the time or if that's going to be a good fit for me. And so we really like to encourage kind of the culture of serving. So then people are looking at as this is something that we are called to do. Christ modeled it for us. And we are called to lay down our lives to help others. And you have the opportunity to do that in a tangible way on a Sunday. And so I would say serving versus volunteering is a very big thing. And then the idea of next steps. So, one of our key phrases, one of our core beliefs is helping people take next steps with God. And we believe that everyone has a next step. whether you are the atheist person who is not interested in God and you got tricked. You thought that this was going to be a party and you show up and they start talking about Jesus and you're like, wait a minute, you have a next step. Versus the person who has been faithfully serving God for 50 years, they have a next step too. And so we really like to constantly be asking people, what is your next step? Maybe that is serving. Maybe that is joining a team. Maybe that's joining a small group. Maybe that's taking the next step in generosity. Whatever that step is, we believe everyone has a next step. And so constantly kind of having that in front of people, so then they're not tempted to kind of fall back into that casual attender, I've arrived and I can just show up, get what I need, consumer kind of mentality. Okay, that's cool. Really good nugget that I can tweet later or post on my Facebook and then go home. But like, what is your next step in becoming more like Christ? And so just giving people the opportunity to ponder that. And then also at the same time, giving them tangible ways that they can do that.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Well, and what I really like is you guys are intentional about it. Like you've thought it through, you have intentionality. And even as you're going through transition, you guys are constantly thinking, okay, long term, here's where we are. And if we make these changes, what's the long term look like? How do we get to where we're wanting to go long term? And so that leads into the next question then, not for you necessarily at 242 or you as, a pastor, but just in general. And I realize I'm asking you to like really step out of your, step out of your comfort zone a little bit. But, for you looking ahead 3 to 5 years, particularly in the area of hospitality and welcoming guests and bringing people into, becoming regular attenders. Like you said, we've lost tons of people. Casual attenders have left the church and they still haven't, most of them have not returned. The numbers every year at churches is that churches are dying. Like we're, in ministry, we are all aware of that. And so for you, looking out 3 to 5 years, what is maybe 1 or 2 things that you see that you say, hey, we either need to start doing this, we need to start paying attention to this, or we need to start addressing this? Like, is there something that you're seeing undercurrents of that we need to be aware of now so that we can better prepare and have things in place and be ready for in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yep. This is one thing that our new lead pastor, Tony, has been really like banging the drum on, and I'm very much for. And the phrase that he uses is we need to be the administrators to the ministers. So as pastors, our job is not to do everything.
Right.
Our job is to go to our congregation, to go to our leaders and say, I believe that God has called you to lead.
Yeah.
I believe God has called you to grow his church, to be a missionary in your workplace, to all that sort of stuff. How can I help you accomplish that goal? I think that a lot of our church culture has been, hey, let's tell people the end goal is to invite someone to come to church, and then we'll do.
Right.
If you can get in the building,
yes,
then we'll do the heavy lifting, which, that is still a way that we still put, a lot of effort into our teaching, into our worship, into our first impressions, like I talked about. But the idea is there a ministry that someone wants to start that we can just give them the freedom to do?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a twofold reason for doing that. One is like you said, our numbers are shrinking, and so we need basically as many ambassadors as we can possibly get.
Yeah.
You see it in social media all the time, where, not that I want to put our business hat on, but you see people where, hey, give people free t-shirts, give people free koozies. Want to why? Because they are promoting something that they like.
Right.
And they are promoting it, then I'm not promoting it. Hundreds of other people are promoting it.
Yeah,
It's the reason we have commercials. It's that we want to spread that as much as we can. And then on the flip side of that, we also are seeing an enormous amount of pastor burnout because one, COVID has just like, no one knows what they're doing.
Right.
People are leaving because you aren't wearing masks, and then in the same church, people are leaving because you are wearing masks.
Right.
Like regardless, like it's almost like this weird no-win situation, and it's causing pastors to burn out. And what we really need to realize, and I think that we'll realize more in the next few years, is the idea of I don't even necessarily want to say the bivocational pastor, but realizing like not all of it is on you,
Mm-hmm.
that
Right.
you are there to do what only you can do.
Yeah.
I know there's a great leader who said that, and I can't remember who it is, but um, but the idea is that you want to almost hand off as much authority, you want to hand off as much responsibility, because one, that takes it off of you and will greatly diminish the chance of you burning out. And then two, it also empowers people because when they feel like they're a part of what's going on at your church, when they're a
Yeah.
key factor in the success and the growth of what's happening at your campus, then they are going to be more involved because now they have skin in the game and now they
Right.
feel like, well, this is my team that I'm leading. If I, like a tangible way of doing this, if I am able to make someone a leader of whatever team, okay, filling the communion trays,
Right.
there's a team leader for that. Parking, there's a leader for that. Prayer, there's a leader for that. What am I able to kind of give off and say, this is your baby. Like,
Right.
what can I do to help? Do you need stuff that needs to be ordered? Do you need the information of, do you need phone numbers so then you can kind of reach out to people? What are the things that I can help you do to help us grow? So I think
Right.
that in a couple of years, the more that pastors can kind of get off the idea of I'm like the guy or the girl that is going to make the ship run
Yep.
versus I am the administrator to help all these other people do the ministry.
Yeah.
I think that that's going to be a big shift because then people are going to feel more involved. They're going to be ambassadors for what you're doing. And I think it'll help growth overall.
Right. Yeah. Well, and scripture tells us to, equip the saints for ministry. And I think that somewhere along the way, that kind of got mixed up for us as pastors and ministry leaders. And I think, like you said, that's a lot of the reason that we see such high degree of burnout. We have such high degree of, depression and anxiety. But I also think it's also why we have such a high percentage of casual attenders because there's nowhere for them to fit in anyway. And
Mhm,
so, they just sit back and they receive everything that we're willing to give them. At the
mhm,
same time, we're just overwhelmed and stressed because there's too much on our plate. And the
mhm,
thing that I say a lot is, what we should all be trying to do is get to the point where we're doing the things that only we can do. We can't delegate
mhm,
it out. We can't hand it off to anybody else. We're doing the things that only we can do and everything else somebody else is doing, whether that's
mhm,
other staff members, volunteers, whatever. We're focusing on the things that, number one, we have to do in the role that we're in and the things that we're specifically gifted and called to do. And so,
mhm,
so yeah, I love that. I think it's great. And I think you're right. I think that that's the shift. That's a shift that we're seeing. And it's probably a shift that needed to happen years and years ago, but COVID has kind
mhm,
of amped that up and pushed us to say, okay, how do we transition back to putting ministry in the hands of the congregations and letting them reach people? And the church just becomes, the old illustration of the life house. Like, the church becomes that where, the saints can come in, be refreshed, renewed, and sent back out in the field to,
mhm,
be the ministers of the gospel every day in whatever setting and in sphere of influence they're in. So that's good.
mhm,
Okay. So as we wrap up, I want everybody to walk away with something that they can, implement or mill over or whatever. And so I want you to share with us your Backstage Pass experience and explain
mhm.
how that becomes the doorway that people at 242 guests at 242 can then enter into the culture of your church and who you are and eventually become regular attenders. So just kind of line that out for us today.
Yep. So we have something called Backstage Pass. We're looking at, if you're looking at a calendar, there's typically 4 weeks in a month. Occasionally there's a fifth. And so we have the same structure for every single month. So week one, we do something called Backstage Pass. How this works is during dismissal. So think post altar call, post challenge. The sermon is done. You're about to do dismissal. The communicator, whether it's the host or whoever's teaching or whoever is up there, will say, hey, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to do something called Backstage Pass. It's just a cool, trendy word that it's like, ooh, that sounds exclusive. That sounds something like cool. And what they say is, If you're new here or just want to know more information, we're just going to do a quick 5-minute tour of the building and answer any questions you might have. If you're interested in that, just meet me right here at the front of the stage, and I'd love to take you on a tour. For everyone else, go be the church where you live, work, and play.
Right.
And then dismissal. And, it's very hit and miss. We might have several weeks where nobody comes up. We might have a week where we have 2 or 3 families come up.
Yeah.
But so week 1 and week 2, that's available. We give them a very quick tour of the building. One, in case they were just unaware, maybe they have kids and they didn't even know we had a kids area, because like you said, like they were running 10 minutes behind and they just went towards the music and sat down.
Pure chaos.
Exactly. And so, hey, this is where our kids section is. This is where our students area is. That also gives a great opportunity for people maybe who don't have kids or students to, once again, have that buy-in. Look at these ministries that this church is doing. Even if you're not directly involved with them, look at what we're doing for our community, look what we're doing for our families. And then that just kind of gets the wheels turning of, okay, this is a church that is vibrant, growing, has intentional next steps for people to take. And all that, like I said, very short, very brief, just kind of an overview of the building. And it lands at our next step table, which is where we have all of our business cards, all of our upcoming events, and all that sort of stuff. So normally whoever's giving them the tour, normally it's whoever was communicating. And one of the reasons we do that is because they have some sort of relationship, because they've heard you talk for a couple minutes at least.
Right.
So it's not, hey, go talk to this person. And they're like, I don't know who that Bill guy is, but like, I know you. We've just been like having a kind of one-way dialogue for the past couple of minutes. And so you give them your business card that has your email, your phone number, all that sort of stuff. Hey, if you have any questions, feel free to call me or send me an email. We get them to fill out a Connect card and at least get their phone number and email. So then we can send out, hey, thank you so much for coming. We are so excited that you came to check us out. Kind of some level of follow-up the next week. And then we always point them to step 1. So week 1, Backstage Pass. Week 2, Backstage Pass. Week 3 is step 1. Step 1 is, I love saying this, 242 101. So some might call it like a membership class. We don't have membership here, but it's the closest thing to that. This is where we dive into our theological stances, how we're organized, are we board run, how is our pastor structure.
It's really your culture experience, right?
Exactly. So like this is more of the deep dive, like I want to know like what kind of ministries you do, like what's your stance on this, and that is normally done with our campus pastor. So it's a little bit of FaceTime with him and gives them the opportunity to ask questions. We have a lot of people maybe in our area specifically who are coming from like a Catholic background. So there are questions about, we do baptisms every week. We fill up the baptismal every week and we say like, hey, like if someone responds to an altar call, let's get baptized today.
Yeah.
And so there are some people that are like, okay, well, do you have a baptism class or do you baptize babies? Just those sort of questions can all get answered in step 1. So that's week 3. And then at the end of step 1, we encourage them to attend our teams training, which is step 4, which I talked about a little bit earlier. It helps kind of really solidify, hey, what is our culture when it comes to being on a team? Right. And so week 4, if anyone wants to be on any team, so worship team, parking lot, kids, students, anything, whether you're opening a door, pouring coffee, or you want to be a communicator on stage, everyone has to go through teams training. And that's because we want people to know the heart of why we're doing what we're doing. The idea of serving versus volunteering, the idea of kind of what you're getting yourself into. We also have a lot of people who have church burnout because they're like, every single week, whenever I showed up to church, I had to do something and I don't want to do that. So we say, okay, well, we have healthy things where you can accept or decline, or, this is the expectation. So you're not over expecting or getting overwhelmed because you didn't know what you were jumping into. Right. And then getting them connected to whoever's in charge of that department. So then they can look at getting on a team. So it's an intentional process and then it just repeats. Good. So then we're back at the beginning of the month, Backstage Pass, step 1, teams training. Nice. And that happens every month. And it helps our staff know that if someone comes to you in week 2 and says, hey, I've been attending for 6 months and I'd really like to serve on the kids team. Hey, on the 4th week, they look it up, on the 4th week, the 24th of the month or whatever, is when we're having our teams training. It's after second service. It's in this room. We would love for you to come. Okay, cool. I'll put that in my calendar.
Good.
And so it helps the staff know that this is the regular routine
Cycle.
and everything like that. So I think that that has worked very well for us because it starts with, hey, do you want to fly like 30,000 feet, look at the church? This is generally what the building looks like. Cool. All right. You want to go a little bit deeper? All right. Here's what we're about. Here's what we believe. You're on board with that? Okay. Well, let's get you plugged in and serving on a team.
That's good.
And that funnel happening every single month.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I like how it's intentional. I like how it builds on itself. I like how it moves people in a natural progression so that people don't get lost. And I like how it's constantly cycling. I think that's the one thing is, I think it's okay to let people wait 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks. But, a lot of times if we do something once a quarter, something as important as like a culture piece or something like that, if we're doing that once a quarter, we have a high degree of probability that people are going to lose interest by the time that comes around.
Yeah.
So I like that it's constantly cycling, constantly going, and it has a lot of intake points for people to be a part of. So that's
Absolutely.
good. That's good. Well, and I think one of the things with moving people from a guest to a regular attender is helping them be familiar with things. Even, as much as you can help them be familiar before they ever walk in the door. So website and those types of things. But once they walk through that door, how do we quickly familiarize them with everything that's going on? Because I think that a lot of times people leave for lots of reasons, but I think especially new people, there's such a high, and you and I both experience this church shopping. There's such a high degree of uncertainty and unfamiliarity. And we come from ministry backgrounds. And so think of somebody who's maybe never gone to church or hasn't gone to church in several years or decades even, and they're walking through those doors. That's very nerve-wracking. And it all comes from, I'm not familiar with what I'm about to experience. And so the faster we can help them become familiar with what's about to happen, what's going to happen, and what we're about, the better or the faster they kind of relax and, enter in and be a part. And then obviously, like you've said, the more people they can meet and the more people that can engage them, the higher probability that they're going to stay. So, so good. Well, Matt, it's been great having you, man. It's been a long time. I don't even remember the last episode that you did with us.
I don't know, but I like getting back in the saddle. This has been fun. It's always good to talk to you, and it's always good to kind of talk ministry for a couple minutes.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate your insight because, again, I think that those front end teams and that welcoming and bringing people, new guests into church is such an important piece. I mean, sermons and worship and all that's important, but man, if we miss it on that front end, then I think that we miss a lot of people. And I love the fact that you're doing that and that you can help us just have a better understanding of where we are and where we're going. And so yeah, so we'll have to do this again. We'll have to bring you back again.
Absolutely.
So maybe we'll have to argue once in a while.
Oh, please. I would love that. I love that. I love talking to Brandon and proving him wrong. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you like losing, that you love to argue with me and lose every time. And that you still have a smile on your face.
Going back, I'm a Lions fan. It's like deep in like my soul. So
yeah, so you have a pretty thick skin. You're used to losing. That's good. That helps.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for being with us in this episode. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you're looking for a free getaway, a chance to get out of town and go somewhere and just rest and relax, go to brandonpartycooper.com/free getaway. Get your list and find a place near you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next episode.